Hello, everyone. Welcome to this online introduction to forming Parish Creation Care Ministry. My name is Karen Van Loon, and I'm the coordinator of the Cultivating Care for Our Common Home program at Faith in the Common Good. I'm also the coordinator of Creation Care Ministry at St. Joan of Arc Parish here in Toronto. Cameras are off because we are recording this event, and the recording will be posted on Faith in the Common Good's YouTube channel. Before we begin, just a little bit about the quote that you see in the corner from John 10:10. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. So 20 years ago, the Social Affairs Commission of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops published the pastoral letter on the Christian ecological imperative called, "You love all that exists. All things are yours, God, lover of life." And it ended with these words: "The lover of life who came so that we all might have life and have it abundantly continues to provide us with opportunities to renew the face of the earth. How can we not take up that challenge?" So the need for us to take up that challenge has grown over the last 20 years. And forming a creation care ministry can help parishes to participate in that work of the Holy Spirit, who is renewing the face of the earth. So we're going to begin with an acknowledgement of the traditional land as one step along the way of working towards reconciliation and showing respect for Indigenous peoples in Canada. And this is connected with care for creation. And Pope Francis has highlighted Indigenous people common home and understanding of intergenerational solidarity as a model for all people. So there's a history of colonialism that has damaged our relationship with the original peoples of this land and contributed to the ecological crisis that we face and which continues today. Yet it is Indigenous peoples who are on the front lines of climate change, but who are also leaders in protecting the land and who are facing arrest, persecution, and even death, particularly in some Latin American countries. Everyone, I think, can recall this year's record-breaking destructive wildfire season in Canada. And this was intensified by the record-breaking heat that we had, the high temperatures and the dry conditions caused by climate change. There are Indigenous experts and news reports that came out this summer that have been raising awareness about how Indigenous peoples are disproportionately affected by wildfire evacuations compared to other people living in Canada. So First Nations and communities with primarily Indigenous populations experienced 42% of those wildfire evacuations, but only make up 5% of people living in what is now known as Canada. An evacuation affects community and has family impacts as well. It affects students going to school. And wildfires and smoke have also had other disproportionate impacts, for example, affecting food security, from the loss of forests and animals for traditional hunting and gathering of native plants. And Indigenous peoples have also been cut off from practicing their traditional culture connected to the land and can't pass that on to their children if they are stuck inside due to smoke and can't get outside. So keeping in mind how healing and reconciliation in our relationship with our common home goes together with healing and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples who have long cared for this land, we begin with the land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that this land is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Petun, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit Indigenous peoples. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, Ojibwe, and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. It was also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. And today, the meeting place of Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples from across Turtle Island. We seek to live in respect, peace, and right relationship, and are mindful of broken covenants. By making a land acknowledgement, we are participating in an active reconciliation, honoring the land and Indigenous heritage, which dates back over 10,000 years. So I invite each of you to take a moment to recall with respect and gratitude the Indigenous people in the traditional territory in the place that you call home. The next slide, please. Before the opening prayer, just a comment about the photo and the phytoplankton are there. Phytoplankton are small but mighty. They're at the base of the marine food web. They make most of the other ocean life possible. They produce about half of the oxygen in the world, and they also help fight climate change by absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. So we'll just keep them in mind. And we're going to begin our prayer with this prayer by Pope Francis, which is in his letter Laudato Si on care for our common home, and it's called a prayer for our earth. And while we are praying this, we will keep in prayer world leaders and negotiators and all others who are gathered at the United Nations Climate Change Conference currently taking place in Dubai right now. And we'll pray as well for Pope Francis' health, which is improving, but on doctors' advice, he had to cancel with great regret going to COP28, where he would have delivered a speech in person that was instead delivered by Cardinal Parolin. And in his speech, the Pope made a heartfelt appeal to all at COP28 to choose life. So we bring this appeal into our prayer today. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain, at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. Next slide. So this next slide shows a basic outline of what I will go through in this introduction to forming a parish creation care ministry. What it is, why do this, possible activities, resources, challenges, and a couple of parish examples. And there will be a Q&A at the end as well, so please post your questions in the chat box and we'll address them at the Q&A. And thank you to Michelle Singh, who is providing technical support tonight, and we'll be monitoring for any questions in the chat box. I would also like to introduce two other people who will be speaking later tonight to share the story of their Toronto parish. Marilyn Grace and Isolde Hayden are both longtime parishioners of St. Anselm's Parish and enthusiastic participants in Eco Ansem. Marilyn since 2016 and Isolde since 2018. Marilyn is a former high school teacher and currently works as a retreat facilitator. And Isolde, before her retirement, taught special education within the Toronto District School Board. Next slide. So this next slide shows basically what is creation care ministry, although there are some variations in how it's defined. It's not we're environmentalists, but this is a ministry which is grounded in the gospel, and it's done on behalf of the Christian community to promote the reign of God. And creation care ministry helps parishioners individually and ourselves to live out our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork and give greater witness to this in a parish. So what is it? It's a ministry organized by the parish, led by a parish group or team, which aims to grow parishioners' care for our common home in their parish, their home, their neighborhood, and the world by deepening ecological spirituality, awareness, and actions. So creation care ministry, it's like a catalyst that's animating the parish as a whole, other ministries and parishioners to deepen care for creation. And deepening ecological spirituality helps to change attitudes and values, so it becomes easier to change habits and take action. We serve God and our neighbors when we care for God's creation. So there's a few Catholic parishes in Toronto that have some type of creation care ministry, although they use different names. It's Creation Care Ministry at St. Joan of Arc Parish, Eco-Anselm Ministry of Ecology at St. Anselm's Parish. And I'm still trying to get in touch with some other parish to see whether their groups are still active, but I believe some of them are. So it is a ministry that is still growing and needs to grow. And there are active ministries in other places like the Archdiocese of Ottawa, Cornwall, the US, and Europe. And how it grows also depends on the parish reality, how this ministry gets set up and what it does. And today I'm just going over some possibilities and recommendations, but the activities could vary depending on the background of those who join. So next slide, please. There are various sources and resources that are used in this presentation, and it reflects some of the material from all of them. And these are also available to parishes as resources. One of the main inspirations is Laudato Si on care for our common home, as well as other Catholic social teaching, especially the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation messages from Pope Francis. The book that you see in the left-hand corner there, called Greening Your Church by Novalis, which came out in 2014, is a practical and very excellent guide to creation care ministry for parishes, dioceses, and religious communities, and it's still available, I believe, as an ebook. The author is Norman Levesque, who is the founder and former executive director of the Green Churches Network. And he's an animator of creation care and ministry in the diocese of Saint-Jean-Longueuil outside Montreal. And he's also a member of the working group of the Vatican's Laudato Si action platform. He also set up the Creation Care School, which is a major source as well for this presentation. And I would encourage everybody to take he has free online courses which are offered through there, and you just have to set up an account. One of which is Growing Your Creation Care Ministry, which is an 8-hour course. And there are a couple of other ones too, like Discovering the Green Pages of the Bible and Cultivating a Spirituality of Creation. Faith in the Common Good also has a guide to developing a green team in your faith community. Now, this is an interfaith guide, so you won't find Catholic eco-spirituality in there. And it's also a little bit outdated, but it still does have a lot of good tips inside of it. Catholic Climate Covenant, which you see down the bottom left corner there. This is a US group, and it was the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops who helped to form Catholic Climate Covenant in 2006. And they help US Catholics respond to the Church's call to care for creation and for the poor. And they have extensive spirituality, education, and action resources, including homily helps for every Sunday Mass based on Laudato Si, and an extensive creation care teams resource library with toolkits, guides available there. And I'm also drawing on my experience in coordinating St. Joan of Arc Parish's creation care ministry, which began in 2018. So there are basically lots of resources that are available to begin this ministry, and I won't be covering everything in those resources, but they are helpful for getting started, especially if people feel that they don't really have the background, and they're a good place to begin, especially taking, for example, that Growing Your Creation Care Ministry course together might be a good way to start. And I will be posting links to all of these resources in a blog on Faith in the Common Good's website. So they'll be available to anybody who wishes. The next slide, please. So why form a parish creation care ministry now? It's a way to respond to what is happening to our common home. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis takes stock of our present situation and points at what he later calls some cracks in the planet. So you can see them there: pollution and waste, climate change, lack of safe drinking water, loss of biodiversity, breakdown in society, global inequality, weak responses. And And so in the last 2 centuries, there's been a lot of good that has come with technical developments, things like medicine, engineering, communications. But at the same time, we can see that there are signs that things are reaching a breaking point, and not everyone has benefited from that development. And the gravest effects of those that environmental problems fall on the most vulnerable who have contributed to the least to that problem. And particularly in the global south, where there are places where people may not yet even have access to energy. So members of our household family are suffering, and we are threatening the foundation of our common home and its ability to sustain life and be a home for life. Pope Francis emphasizes that social and ecological problems are linked. It's one complex crisis, and we are called to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Next slide, please. So we're going to look a little bit more closely at one of those cracks in the planet, which Pope Francis describes and now calls the climate crisis. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC, is the United Nations body that looks at the science related to climate change, and they produce these major reports every 5 to 7 years. And the quote that you see at the bottom is from the 2023 World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation message by Pope Francis, who is very aware of the science related to climate change. And he's speaking about the latest IPCC report, which came out this year, and which also emphasizes that climate change is having dangerous impacts on nature and people in every region of the world, and hitting the most vulnerable people and ecosystems especially hard. And those who have emitted the least amount of greenhouse gases are paying the heaviest price. For example, deaths from floods, droughts, and storms were 15 times higher in highly vulnerable regions. We are not on track to limit warming to 1.5 or even 2 degrees Celsius. And that is still possible, but it will require urgent climate action with deep and sustained greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And every increase in warming that happens yet results in more suffering and hazards. So climate change is also the focus of the apostolic exhortation Laudate Deum, which Pope Francis published on October 4th this year. And it was to complement and update Laudate Si. And Laudate Deum is praise God in Latin. And it's addressed to all people of goodwill on the climate crisis. The Pope is extremely concerned about our response to the climate emergency. And Laudate Deum includes an overview of the latest climate science, damages and risks, and it explores some of the underlying roots as well. And Pope Francis appeals for a change of direction at the UN Climate Change Summit, COP28, being held in Dubai right now from November 30th to December 12th. And while recognizing that the most effective solutions come from national and international political decisions, the Pope also asks everyone to accompany this pilgrimage of reconciliation with the world that is our home. And by changing personal, family, and community habits, we help to bring about cultural change and transformation. So next slide, please. So why set it up? Why set up a creation care ministry? It's a faith response at this critical time of ecological and social crisis, a way to respond to the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Our individual actions and vocations are important, but they're not enough. Like, we also need to build relationships and community witness, dialogue and solidarity around care for our common home. So community witness by words and actions also encourages growing this broader culture of care for all creation, especially for those who are vulnerable and on the front lines of the ecological crisis, and yet who have contributed the least to it. So that's people living in poverty everywhere, Indigenous peoples, future generations, other living creatures. And when parishioners can see that creation care is an important part of faith at church, it can more easily spread to home, school, work, community, and other places. Pastors are busy and can't do everything. So a team helps by bringing together various talents and also providing mutual support, which is very importantly, this is not easy to do, and it is helpful to have a group of like-minded people to work with. So we act not because of fear and not because others may or may not be acting, but because it is the right thing to do. And we are called to take care of God's creation. And this is part of our expression of love of God and love of neighbor. So I am going to read as well that quote at the bottom there. The best of science is now warning us that our actions and lifestyles are putting the earth, our home, in serious jeopardy. Our challenge is to get care for the earth, responsibility for creation, and the threat posed by climate change onto the agenda of parishes, congregations, and individual Christians. To help us in this endeavor, we need practical, user-friendly programs that will empower ordinary people to understand the dangers we face and discover ways to change our practices and lifestyles to mirror our desire to be a biblical people. So this comes actually before Laudato Si was even published. It's a quote that's in this book by, if you remember from the beginning, by Norman Levesque, and it's by the Archbishop, Winnipeg Archbishop Emeritus James Weisgerber, and it's in the foreword of that book. And the Archbishop also said, we are called to be not only a people of hope, but also a people of action. So the aim is not to be judgmental, but to encourage each small step and not to be doom and gloom alarmists, but to instead promote action and solutions. The photo that you see there is from the garden party. And this is just an example of a kind of practical action, although it wasn't one that we did as Creation Care Ministry at St. Joan of Arc Parish. This garden is actually mainly on Redeemer Lutheran, which is right next door to us. And there's a small part that's also on the St. Joan of Arc property. And it's a place of ecumenical collaboration and community building. It's a giving garden, so that the food that's grown there is given to local shelters and St. Francis Table, and they have pollinator plants there as well. And it's great when the pastor comes over as well and gives a blessing for the garden. So it's just an example of an initiative that could be taken up by a Creation Care ministry. Next slide, please. So why set up a Creation Care ministry? As you're probably guessing by now, the changes that we need to make are not simple and they aren't a quick fix. It's more than just recycling better or changing light bulbs. They might be a good place to start, but we can't stop there. Pope Francis in Laudato Si emphasizes that it is we human beings who need to change, and that those cracks in the planet that we looked at earlier are just the surface of a deeper ethical, cultural, and spiritual crisis. So we need to radically change from the destructive course that we in our civilization are currently on. And there's many things that need to change that touch all areas of our lives and the world in which we live. And you can see the list there, the society, politics, economics, culture, education, spirituality, and a few others as well. So we need to change hearts and minds, attitudes and practices, and grow a broader culture of care. And all of that takes time. And faith has a very important role to play there. And it is very helpful to have a Creation Care ministry that will continue to work in an ongoing basis in a parish on this. Next slide, please. A parish Creation Care ministry can help the parish move forward on the long path of renewal. And we need all three categories of activities to be effective: spirituality, awareness or education, and action. If we have prayer without action or witness, it can seem hypocritical. If we have action without prayer, it doesn't seem to have depth, and you don't have that long-term motivation to continue. Spirituality is needed also to help change attitudes and values. and education or awareness raising is needed to understand the ecological crisis and develop new skills and practices. It's a good idea to begin with something that's simple to gain experience, like, for example, a prayer service during the season of creation, or even a table after Mass explaining what this new ministry is about and to get input from parishioners on priorities. What parishes do also depends on the reality at the parish and the skills and the interest of the people who join. There are some various good timings for events and activities, such as the Season of Creation, which runs from September 1st to October 4th. Laudato Si week in late May, which is around the anniversary date of Laudato Si, Lent, Advent, are also some other possibilities. And when these aren't the first things that we do, but when ready, it's good to try to make connections with reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. And again, when ready, it's good to also seek ecumenical, interfaith, and neighborhood collaboration. Just as an example on this, there was one season of creation where we held an ecumenical Taizé prayer service at St. Joan of Arc Parish. And we had a fellowship reception afterwards and invited an Indigenous elder who shared a teaching with us as well. It was a Creation Care Ministry event, but we had a lot of collaboration from the neighboring Christian churches, Native Peoples Ministry, and various St. Joan of Arc Parish ministries and volunteers as well. So it was definitely a collaborative effort. For neighborhood collaboration, as an example, we've connected up sometimes with the Neighborhood Environmental Network, and we also seek collaboration with other parish ministries to help grow care for creation in the parishes, and emphasize that it's all of us who can cooperate as instruments of God for the care of creation, which come from Laudato Si. It's not just the work of Creation Care Ministry. And it's a good idea to offer, like good practice to offer help with large parish events, just to share the work of more environmentally friendly practices such as waste sorting or dishwashing. And we try also to have conversations with various ministries about collaboration on activities and inviting ministry representatives to give input at events such as a conversation on waste reduction in the parish. And would depend on what the event is, which ministries we approach. For example, building and finance about retrofits, or the parish events will collaborate with Development and Peace, the Catholic Women's League, the youth group. And it's best to keep the pastor and the leadership team in the loop. There shouldn't be any surprises about anything, and that this is all part of building relationships. Recruitment, we find, is also an ongoing thing, and it's good to have sign-up sheets at events so that people may ask to join at that time. Okay, next slide, please. These are just some examples of spirituality activities. Cultivating a Christian eco-spirituality helps to deepen ecological conversion, which Pope Francis calls a transformation of how we relate to our sisters and brothers, to other living beings, to creation in all its rich variety, and to the Creator, who is the origin and source of all life. We also move from seeing creation as just resources for us to use and approach creation as God's handiwork, sustained by God's love, and a revelation in some way of God. The season of creation, they have free ecumenical and Catholic resources for prayer and liturgy are produced each year, and the Vatican is a contributor on the steering committee and a partner. And as I mentioned, homily helps are available as well at Catholic Climate Covenant for each Sunday based on Laudato Si. Depending on the background of ministry members, it would depend on their background whether they're able to help with religious education or confirmation classes or offer retreats. The photo that you see there comes from the Archdiocese of Toronto's Season of Creation beach cleanup event that happened in 2018, which began by a prayer outside. Next slide, please. So these are some examples of raising awareness or education activities. We're raising awareness about church teachings like Laudato Si, the suffering of creation, for example, in climate change and biodiversity loss, problems and solutions, learning about the local environment. And we need to understand environmental issues from a faith perspective to build willingness to act. So it's not just knowing more, but like Laudato Si says, number 19, the goal is not for us to just amass information and satisfy our curiosity, but to become painfully aware. And so then to move to a better relationship with our common home and to take action. And it's better to emphasize solutions more than the problems because it's more encouraging to people and a little bit more positive and hopeful. The photo that you see there is actually from a St. Joan of Arc Parish event where we viewed and discussed the Laudato Si film called The Letter, A Message for Our Earth. And this is an 80-minute documentary that was produced in 2022 with Vatican collaboration. So the film is free to watch on YouTube and has subtitles and dubbed versions that are available in several languages. Parishes and groups are actually encouraged to host film screenings to facilitate dialogue and action on care for our common home. Registration is required on the website to get a link to the film version for public screenings. We have also used other films and hosted coffee and film viewings and dialogue after Mass. For example, Franciscan Father Dan Horan has a whole series on Laudato Si, which is excellent. Next slide, please. So these are some examples of some practical activities, and ecological spirituality and awareness can help lead to this ecological conversion and to new habits and practices and actions. The season of creation is a great time for putting faith into action. And this photo again is from that beach cleanup with the Archdiocese of Toronto. That's just one example. And the aim is to reduce our environmental impact and care for our common home, both as individual parishioners and as a parish community. And we need to give this kind of a witness that we are on this journey of practicing care for creation in our own faith community before we try to do advocacy or call for change from politicians or businesses. So taking action at the parish demonstrates that creation care is a priority, and this action can then spread to families, schools, businesses, and other faith communities. And some actions are easier and some are harder. Some take more time and cost, at least initially. And it's not easy to change habits or how things have always been done. And some actions might seem basic or simple, but they give a very visible witness at parish events and to visitors. And one of those is using real dishes versus disposables at events and making real efforts to reduce and properly sort waste. All of this helps to build that culture of care versus what Pope Francis calls a culture of waste and indifference. So at St. Joan of Arc Parish, Creation Care Ministry and Development and Peace have helped to move, or we're helping, it's an ongoing effort, but we are helping to move parish events over to using real dishes and the dishwasher. And in 2020, Creation Care Ministry hosted 2 parish town halls and asked ministry representatives to participate to learn about Laudato Si, but also to discuss ways to reduce and better manage waste in the parish. And this, again, is like an ongoing effort. So some ways to save energy are behavior changes, and they don't cost any money. Things like just closing the doors so warm or cool air doesn't escape the church, or just turning off lights and turning off water. Basic things, but even though they're basic things, I know from experience that they don't always happen. Others cost money, and the return on investment takes varying lengths of time depending on the energy efficiency upgrade. Some are short, medium, or long-term projects and can take more time or funds. There is a good idea to do some kind of an energy audit, and this is like a walk through there are different options for doing that. There's one which is like a walkthrough version that a parish can do on its own. And it's also possible to pay for one, and then you get a more detailed help and report with costs and benefits and priority actions. So I'm not a building person, but Faith in the Common Good, the organization I currently work for, does have a free walkthrough audit guide that's being updated for 2024. And someone there also does a green audit for a fee. And it's important to also communicate and celebrate any accomplishments that happen in the parish on any of these kinds of activities. Next slide, please. So these again are some examples of solidarity actions. I'm just going to read the quote at the bottom there. Love overflowing with small gestures of mutual care is also civic and political. And in this framework, along with the importance of little everyday gestures, social love moves us to devise larger strategies to halt environmental degradation and to encourage a culture of care which permeates all society. So in this section of Laudato Si, Pope Francis goes on to call love for society and commitment to the common good as outstanding expressions of charity, which affect not only the relationships between individuals, but also social, economic, and political relationships. So we need a systemic change towards sustainability and justice in laws, agreements like the UN climate agreement that's currently being negotiated, economies, budgets, policies like funding for public transit or safe bike lanes. Solidarity actions could be directed towards changing policies at all levels of government, whether it's municipal, provincial, federal, even international. And there are also situations of injustice that are calling for change, such as vulnerable global south countries that contributed the least to the climate change, but are suffering loss and damage impact, and so seeking funding from wealthier countries who have contributed more to the climate crisis. And at any meetings or communications with government officials like MPs, you have to be clear about whether or not you're representing the parish. And I find generally we don't, at least we don't at Joan of Arc, when engaging in any advocacy activities. I find that we don't even really represent Creation Care Ministry when visiting political leaders. It's more like whoever is interested in going for a visit as a group of concerned Catholics who live or go to church in the riding. Like the parish or even Creation Care Ministry members may not have reached consensus on a particular issue, and not everyone, even within Creation Care, in our Creation Care Ministry, would want to engage in this way and may prefer more practical actions instead. But some parishes, if you're able to work out an agreement with parish leadership on these types of things, then maybe you can go as a representative of the parish, but that has to be worked out with the parish. And even if going as individual Catholics, it's still a good idea that first the parish has been taking some practical actions. So the faith community is witnessing to care for our common home in some of its own practices first, before calling for change from governments and society. And as I said, not everyone feels comfortable in visiting their political representatives like their MP, but there are some other solidarity actions that are possibilities. One of which is showing solidarity with young people who are protesting climate change. We did this in November. This is a photo from November 2019, where we went to Queen's Park and we began with a prayer and then joined the students with Fridays for Future. Pope Francis has praised the student movement, and in Laudate Deum, he is speaking in speaking about the UN climate change conferences. He says, this is Pope Francis saying this, society as a whole ought to exercise a healthy pressure, since every family ought to realize that the future of their children is at stake. Another solidarity action is learning about and gathering support on petitions like the Healthy Planet, Healthy People petition. We promoted signing this petition at St. Joan of Arc Parish. Again, you need to discuss it with the pastor first before doing something like this. This was a petition campaign which was facilitated by Laudato Si movement and promoted as well by the Vatican. And it called on political leaders participating at the UN Biodiversity and Climate Change conferences, this was last year and the year before, to set meaningful targets to protect creation. And over 120,000 Catholics around the world and 420 organizations signed that petition, and the signatures were presented at the UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow and the UN Biodiversity Conference in Montreal last year. Another possibility at federal and provincial election time is raising awareness about the resources that the Archdiocese of Toronto produces to help discern one's vote, and which includes on environmental issues from a Catholic perspective. And they usually offer some background information with quotes from Catholic social teaching, and then some questions for reflection and to ask questions to ask candidates. So it's good to raise awareness that these resources are available at election time to help inform one's vote. Next slide, please. So the roots of colonialism are still alive today in our, as I've mentioned before, in our relationship with the earth and our relationship with Indigenous peoples who are caretakers of the earth. Indigenous peoples are leading the way on biodiversity protection. They make up 5% of the global population and yet care for and protect about 80% of the planet's biodiversity. We need to grow in understanding of these interconnections, and healing our relationship with nature and the environment means healing our human relationships, especially our relationship with Indigenous peoples. And with regards to the transition to renewable energy, which requires mining and a lot of mining, we are in danger of moving forward with that same mentality that got us into our current ecological and social crisis, the one of profit before considering the impacts on people and the environment. And this is a photo of the Grassy Narrows First Nations at Queen's Park, their river run in 2022. So Grassy Narrows is an Indigenous community in Northern Ontario that's been through many traumas that include forced attendance in church-run residential schools, relocation away from their traditional living areas, hydrodamming, flooding sacred sites and wild rice beds, mercury contamination, clear-cut logging of their forests, and mining. So these traumas have also led to many social health and economic problems, as well as devastation of their culture. Now they joined with 4 other First Nations in early 2023 to form the First Nations Land Defense Alliance in an effort to defend against resource extraction in their territories. Governments across Canada are pushing to open more mines faster in an effort to secure supplies of minerals that are needed to build low emission technology like electric vehicles. Now, it's not Grassy Narrows has said they aren't against development, but they are against development without their consent. So this is just one example, and there are others that are there. And we need to become aware of these connections and not just assume that, renewable energy, everything is great about it, it's going to help solve the climate crisis. We do need to be aware of how it's being done, how that transition is happening, and the kinds of impacts that it is having on the communities who are dealing with the mining that is happening there, both in here in Canada and in the global south. Okay, next slide. These are just some of the Catholic ecumenical interfaith resources and networks that are helpful connections for creation care ministry. And the resources are good for finding content for activities and to also help with planning them. Laudato Si movement, formerly called the Global Catholic Climate Movement, was founded in January 2015 just before Pope Francis published Laudato Si, and they changed their name in 2021 because they are actually about more than just climate change, like Laudato Si, and especially recognizing the need to deal with the climate and biodiversity crises together. And many of their key initiatives are named for Laudato Si. They have Laudato Si Animators, which is a training program that a lot of people in Canada have completed, and it's available and provides excellent background. There's also Laudato Si Week, Laudato Si Circles, Laudato Si Retreats. Anyway, you get the idea. And their mission is to inspire and mobilize the Catholic community to care for our common home and achieve climate and ecological justice in collaboration with all people of goodwill. There are actually almost 1,000 organizational members plus individual members around the world with national chapters that include one here in Canada that I'll speak about in a minute. And they have extensive eco-spirituality resources, including a prayer book, education, lifestyle, advocacy resources, and campaigns like the Healthy Planet, Healthy People petition that I mentioned. They're also involved with the Laudato Si Week and Season of Creation campaigns as well. Mouvement Laudato Si Movement Canada is the Canadian chapter of Laudato Si Movement, and they connect with the international Laudato Si Movement campaigns and resources. And similar to the international, they focus on the ecological, spiritual conversion, lifestyle, and advocacy dimensions, but also adding reconciliation with Indigenous peoples as a focus. And there is a Canadian network with Canadian resources, and it's possible to connect up with campaigns here, all to help bring Laudato Si to life. Laudato Si Week is sponsored by the Vatican and facilitated by Laudato Si Movement. And they celebrated on the anniversary of Pope Francis' letter, Laudato Si. And it's become a way for Catholics to celebrate the progress made in bringing Laudato Si to life and to commit ourselves to also further action and prayer for our common home. There's usually an annual theme, resources, and actions that are available. The Season of Creation, which begins on September 1st, the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation, and runs through October 4th, the Feast of St. Francis. They're coordinated by a global ecumenical steering committee that includes Laudato Si Movement and the Vatican. And their website has free downloadable prayer, education, and action resources, as well as ecumenical and Catholic resources as well. Catholic Climate Covenant, I've already mentioned the resources there. For the Love of Creation is a Canadian faith-based initiative for climate justice. And they bring together Canadian faith communities and faith group organizations like Laudato Si Movement Canada, Development and Peace. And they offer various resources and activities and small group dialogue guides on climate change, newsletter advocacy initiatives. You also see there a couple of resources from the Jesuit Forum for Social Faith and Justice based here in Toronto. They've produced these dialogue guides, one for Laudato Si, as well as one on listening to Indigenous voices. Their dialogue guide for Laudato Si brings a Canadian perspective to Laudato Si and is good for developing a deeper understanding. And we've used this with Creation Care Ministry at St. Joan of Arc. For 15 to 30 minutes at the beginning of our meetings, we've slowly worked our way through it and reading and then having a short dialogue on it. The Green Churches Network is a Canadian ecumenical organization and network, and they offer as well extensive spirituality, education, and action tools that are available in English and French on their website. I'll speak a little bit about faith and the common good soon. Actually, next slide I will. So next slide, please. So I work with Faith and the Common Good, a Canadian interfaith environmental charity and network, and they work with local faith-based environmental, municipal, Indigenous, and community partners across the country to host a wide variety of practical, educational, and spiritual programs that encourage faith-building energy efficiency, interfaith climate justice, clean water alliances, increase support for our climate vulnerable neighbors, and more. And they offer practical educational tools and services to help reduce the faith community's ecological footprint. For example, that do-it-yourself walkthrough audit guide I mentioned. And also they have numerous gardening resources such as native plant gardens, pollinator bird-friendly gardens. And one of the pictures that you see there is actually from Holy Cross Parish, which an animator, the Toronto animator with Faith and the Common Good worked with to help put in the garden there. Next slide, please. So it is good to to get the Creation Care Ministry started up. It is good to begin by speaking with the pastor and relevant ministry leaders and listen to any concerns and try to address them. For example, not representing the parish in meetings with political representatives, or avoiding partisan politics, or whatever it might be. And then to follow whatever the parish process happens to be for setting up a new ministry. And there are different leadership possibilities for this ministry. It might be led by representatives from various ministries, such as liturgy, catechism, building and youth, or it could be led by parishioners who have shared interests, which is what happened at St. Joan of Arc Parish. And skills, one person might not have all these skills, like all the skills, but people bring a wide variety of skills. I mean, it might be leadership, people skills, reading and writing, planning skills, building skills, eco-spirituality. One of the people who just joined our ministry has website skill or technical skills, and is able to help with a lot of our computer and technical stuff. So a lot of skills can be useful in this ministry. And in conversations with parishioners and ministries, we try to find others with interest and, you know, what their priorities are. And if this ministry hasn't yet started, it's good to raise it at parish meetings. And the next step, at least in our parish, was on Stewardship Weekend to set up a table to speak about it and then sign up any new members. And it's also on an ongoing way possible to ask parishioners to join and leadership for recommendations as well. It's helpful if members who join have time, skills, or motivation. The skills needed for this are pretty wide ranging, and people don't always have to have like an environmental background. There's a lot of possibilities that are useful. It is helpful to have some time though to volunteer to help with projects or events and meetings, but some people have more time and some people have less, and people don't have to help with everything. So whatever time they're able to offer, it's all good. It's good to reach out as well to the youth group and invite youth involvement, because they do face impacts from the ecological crisis. And just to give an example of one of this, during COVID, my son was in high school and needed volunteer hours, and he wanted to practice a graphics design program he was learning. So I suggested that he might want to make posters for our parish that would help the parish with waste sorting. And he did do that, and the posters are very helpful. So there might be high school students who are looking for ways to get their community hours and be willing to help out with parish projects. And it's good to see collaboration and input from other ministries and parish staff. And if some people have limited time or skills, but they're interested, they might just want to be part of the email group and receive minutes and then just become involved from time to time on a small project, and that's good too. So next slide, please. So some of the challenges that come up and some of the strategies for how to deal with them. One of the challenges that we've been finding is finding funds for energy retrofits and other greening projects. There's fewer grants that are available and for certain retrofits, so it can be challenging. One that is available though is the Save on Energy Small Business Program, and they've actually increased their grant recently. Parishes can apply for this, and it is fairly simple. We did do it at St. Joan of Arc Parish, and they're offering incentives of $3,000 for eligible lighting equipment and up to $2,500 for eligible non-lighting equipment, like refrigeration and smart thermostat upgrades. So there is some paperwork and that you have to do, but they basically come in and do everything. Once you do the paperwork, they provide the contractor, they come in and do all the work, they do all the cleanup, which compared to the process for some other building retrofits that you have to do, it's a lot simpler. Enbridge is also worth asking them about any incentives they have for boiler upgrades or other natural gas equipment before doing a boiler replacement. And sometimes there are grants available through the Faith in the Common Good Toronto Animator, who gets a grant for a handful of faith communities every year for something like a native plant pollinator garden. Our Lady of Lourdes and Holy Cross have put in gardens this way. For complexity, you saw from the presentation that these are complex issues, but there are also lots of resources and ready-made resources. And it's always good to, listen and look for resource people if you can find them, like building committee people, somebody in the parish who really understands climate change and can be there to answer questions at an event. It might also be resource people in the neighborhood groups and networks. If you're connecting up with these groups, you can look out for people. Disagreements and challenging conversations sometimes do come up, believe it or not. To respond with them, it's good to have respectful, try to keep the conversations respectful, not get into confrontation and debate, and to try to listen for some different perspectives and seek some shared values and common ground. I'm just going to give you an example of this, so you get a little bit of what I'm getting at there. I have spoken with people who don't believe in climate change, and I can talk about all the science I want, and it does not matter. What we have agreed on, and is things like living simply, or things like taking care of our children. Maybe public transit is another one, but that for that one person that I'm thinking of was mainly the living simply as part of our faith. And it's actually an overconsumption of materials and energy that are at the root of the ecological crisis. So if we can agree on things like living simply, that and actually really practicing that's one way of finding common ground, and not necessarily agreeing on climate change, but agreeing on maybe some of the solutions or some of the actions and some of the values that are behind that. Political concerns. Consistently connecting with church teaching like Laudato Si and putting faith into action. Whenever we do any kind of an advocacy action at St. Joan of Arc, we very much connected with something that Pope Francis said or something which is going on in the church, and really make those connections obvious. And we need to avoid being partisan and to focus on policies and not political parties. As a charity, we can, as churches are charities and should not be getting partisan. And what does partisan mean? It means showing direct or indirect support for one political party over another, and charities need to avoid this. We need to bring our faith to politics and not our politics to faith. So we are first grounded in our faith perspectives, and need to get across the message too that all are welcome and needed in care for our common home, regardless of political preferences. And we can somewhere find common ground to work together on some things. Next slide, please. So parishes are different and have different cultures and experiences, and how Creation Care Ministry gets set up probably reflects this. So I would like to invite Marilyn Grace and Isolt Hayden, those longtime parishioners of St. Anselm's Parish and enthusiastic participants of EcoAnsem, to share some of their story.
Well, thank you, Karen. I have the advantage of starting, I guess, or the disadvantage. Thank you. That presentation covered a lot, and it has really informed me about some of the directions our parish can go in. One of the things you wanted to know was a little bit, how did we start? And so it really started with two parishioners worried about the environment. And so what they did is they spoke to the pastor and they kick-started things off with a mass. So it was based in faith. And I think that's key. And you've mentioned that a few times. So there was a mass dedicated to the care for creation. The local parish school was invited to be participating in that. They sang at the mass. They had artwork on display. The prayers of the faithful were all centered around care for creation. There were visuals, leaf shapes that represented hopes and dreams for the planet. So I think the fact that it was based in faith was really important. And that started in 2014. And then it started to grow quite a bit. And then it led to other people becoming involved. I didn't really get involved until about 2016. And then I was involved in helping to facilitate a retreat day at the parish around the elements and care for creation. I think it's important that, and you've mentioned this several times, that the pastor is involved and committed. And we certainly have had that experience with the pastor who was there at the beginning and our current pastor, who actually helped us move from our EcoAnsem group to EcoAnsem ministry. And I think that's a key thing. And ministry is really important because all of the ministries need to be involved. And Isil, do you want to tell them a little bit about how we managed to invite or infiltrate, as you say, to get some of the ministries involved?
Yeah, I always say we tried to infiltrate, and Sebastian, who's in that picture, Sebastian Gomes, said maybe cross-fertilized was a better terminology to use.
Right.
But we, through the retreat that Marilyn mentioned, she and Kathy Murtha led that at our parish, and through that retreat, there was a lot of dialogue. And one of our members, Joanne, she suggested having a ministry fair. So we had a ministry fair as a way of community building. And that was wonderful because we realized how many ministries, active ministries we had at our church. And even we as an active ministry didn't realize all the work that all the other ministries were sort of individually doing. So it was a very fabulous community building exercise. Through that, we then had contacts for each of the ministries. So we took names. We asked for 2 reps from each ministry to come to have a ministry dialogue. And at that ministry dialogue, we explained further, why it was a faith-based area of ministry and how we invited each area of ministry, the reps to go back to their areas of ministry and discern together how they, as a ministry, could commit to an ecological action. And their commitment could either be through their service, the way that they conducted themselves as a ministry, or it could have been connected to their theme. So they had a choice, or they could do both. And then they sent in those commitments, and we posted them in the lobby of the church. Father Tom, our pastor, really was very pleased with the ministry dialogue and the response that we got. And he requested that we do an all parish dialogue. And we didn't do that because of COVID. But we had a meeting recently in Maryland. You could maybe talk to that, but we're going to reactivate that idea and invite an all parish dialogue shortly,
Right.
Possibly during Lent, we think.
We're hoping. We also I want to emphasize the fact that we do have a monthly mass Friday once a month that is completely devoted to creation and the care for creation. And every Wednesday evening, people in the parish are invited to say the rosary for peace and care for creation. And so again, it's that faith-based that faith-based focus that I think is really important. A couple of the things that we did as a group, we invited members of the parish to get involved in a cleanup around Earth Day. And actually, it ended up being quite a lovely connection with one of our local grocery stores. and people from the grocery store who worked there came out and started to help as well. We also, and maybe Isel, you could talk to this about the letters to the business community in our
Yeah, we
area.
decided to write letters. We noticed that a lot of the businesses in our area, Baby Lee side, were still using plastic straws and a lot of other single-use plastic products. So we decided to write a letter to them. We wrote a small one-page letter, and I did send you, Karen, I sent you the template for that if anybody was interested in a similar letter. And we hand delivered them. 2 members at a time. We hand delivered to each of the individual stores that we thought would maybe be interested in dialogue. We asked to speak to their managers, and it was really a fabulous eye-opener for us because we reached out to a lot of different faith backgrounds and people who, you know, just values education oriented as well, and no particular faith that they identified with, but they were struggling with some of their own ecological challenges. And so we were able to be listeners. We were able to listen to what their challenges were and then try to come back with possible solutions. And we were invited to the Business Improvement Association dialogue as well. They invited us because they were that interested, which was wonderful. It was really very motivating for us. And it was a lovely invitation and an opportunity for dialogue with our own local stores. And we did represent our own parish. We did say we were a local Catholic parish, but that we were interested in interfaith collaboration. And you know, we weren't trying, we were just welcoming dialogue is all we represented. We didn't come in with a particularly Catholic mission, although we did declare our faith-based mission ourselves.
Yeah, and that was done with the support of the pastor as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we
I
really
think we
haven't,
hit 35 stores, Marilyn.
yeah, we haven't done anything without, you know, sort of running things by him, and he's been very supportive. Looking to the future, I have, before we talk a little bit about that, I want to just say COVID has really created a big challenge, I find, and I don't think we're the only parish suffering from ministries diminishing, and then how do you rebuild that, you know? And that's something that we've sort of talked about. A core group of us continued through COVID and did, you know, some studying online. We actually, as a group, we had gone through braiding
St.
sweetgrass,
Ignatian discernment, we did.
yeah, the St. Ignatian discernment. So different things like that that kept us connected. Right now, we're working on a book called Anam Cara by John O'Donohue, and we'll get together and talk about that. But how do we get the rest of the parish involved? So one of the things we're looking at is trying to offer a retreat during Lent that would be open to anybody in the parish. And in that retreat, we're hoping to focus not just on Laudato Si, but Laudato Deum. So that's one thing in the offering. The other thing we're thinking of is trying to then move towards a parish dialogue again. But I think it's small steps to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll invite the parish dialogue. We're thinking that we'll use Laudato Deum as the core for that presentation. We'll do a presentation and do breakout groups and have people, you know, talk about different sections of it and then come back together and try to bridge to actual application within the parish or within the neighborhood.
And I have to say, we do have a very visible bulletin board as you enter into the church. Isel's been incredible about keeping that up and organized. You saw of her in a picture earlier in Karen's presentations, and I think that was actually examples of the different ministries and their commitment to being environmentally conscious and to have care for creation. So that's something she's been updating. We don't really have a formal president, treasurer, secretary for our group. We're sort of a fluid group, and we're trying to build on that and to always invite people into the group. And I think the other thing that we've done is that we have a presence in our bulletins every week.
I was going to show that actually. We don't have a slide, but I have
an example. Okay.
This entire section is dedicated to our ecology messages. And we try to connect them either with Advent or with Lent, sorry. And we quote quite often from actually from Laudato Si Movement Canada, or from the Jesuits. We use quotes from that. We use a lot of quotes from Laudato Si formerly, and now we've sort of switched a bit to doing Laudato Deum. And we have a mission statement. I wanted to mention the mission statement because we have 5 different components.
Right.
And the components, we try to rotate through the components. So we have mindfulness, we have prayer, we have action, we have learning, education, communication, advocacy, that type of thing. So we just rotate. We try to make sure we're not too single focused on just education or single focused on any one component. We try to spread it around, and that keeps us balanced, I think, Marilyn.
I think so. And I think it also means that people have a different way into the group if they want, or to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
One of our goals for next year also is to have a special mass to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the beginning of our group. So I think that's important. Again, that's something that, we'll run by the pastor and double check with him. But I think it's something that would be important to remind the parish that we've been, doing this for 9 years, and hope, obviously, want to continue. It's not without its challenges, but I think, you start small, and wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, you just have to know that God is there, and we keep plugging ahead and don't lose hope. I don't know if anybody has questions, or if does that cover, Karen? Is there anything else you'd like us to touch on?
No, that's great. We're going to ask for questions in a minute. So if I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for sharing some of Eco Anselm's story. I remember when I started to communicate with my parish priest about starting a creation care ministry, I was able to say in there, well, St. Anselm's Parish has this ministry, Eco Anselm, and so I'm not the first one asking about this. It was in my communications, and I didn't feel alone because I knew St. Anselm's had a group, and it does help to get this kind of a ministry started up when you can point to other parishes who have this ministry already happening. So I'm going to speak just briefly about St. Joan of Arc. In the fall of 2018 is when we started up. Prior to that, we had tried to do some different things, and it was actually Development and Peace in our parish who was doing a lot of creation care actions. But because they focus on a campaign and spend a lot of time doing other things, I wanted to do more on creation care ministry. And so I began approaching the parish about starting this up. And they suggested that we do a stewardship weekend table with all the other ministries, and then see if anybody would join. And there were 10 people who signed up on that stewardship weekend. Now only about half the people actually came out and become involved, but we found that's pretty standard of people who sign up for something like that. Just once again, thank you to St. Anselm's for helping us to get started in our parish.
Karen, I just wanted to mention one thing that I think is really important too, is that the Eco Anselm ministry has broadened itself a little bit and looked at a little bit of our connection to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And one of the things we did was we invited one of our parishioners who actually traveled with the Indigenous groups to the Vatican, and had her come and speak to the parish about her experience. And then that was part of a series. And the second part was we, thanks to Isolde, we were able to invite the Deputy Minister of Indigenous Affairs and Northern Development to come and speak to the parish. And I think that was really definitely part of our Care for Creation ministry, and well received.
Thank you. So as you can see, there's some diversity in between just the 2 parishes here, and that we learn from each other. And I'm just wanted to put out that I am offering a free workshop or presentation in Toronto as an introduction to forming a parish creation care ministry or eco ministry. And given the the deep sort of changes that have to happen, it's helpful to have a group that can support and learn from each other and help the parish work through this ecological conversion and to encourage actions. My work contract does come to an end at the end of the year, but I plan to continue on a volunteer basis with this Creation Care Ministry outreach, and we'll still offer that free presentation. It'll be more like parishes helping parishes, and as long as I can get there by TTC, I'm good. It'll be free. So it'll be more of an expanded version of what this webinar was about today. And if I will be asking also if anybody at St. Anselm's, if anything comes up, if they'd be willing to join and be part of that if they wish. Okay, so are there any questions for any of us? Now is the time to. I didn't see anything in the chat box there, so. And if there are no questions, perhaps we'll move to then the prayer, the closing prayer. So the next slide, please. So that was my mistake. This was our question slide. So a nice quote at the bottom there of how we can all rejoice that our loving Creator sustains our humble efforts to care for the earth, which is God's home, and where His word became flesh and lived among us, and which is constantly being renewed by the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So we don't have to do this on our own. Next slide, please. We'll pray together for the COP28 Climate Summit. God of blessings, the universe sings of your glory. Deepen our gratitude for all you have made, and awaken in us a renewed commitment to care for the earth and each other. Inspire world leaders at COP28 with openness to listen to those most affected by climate change, and with courage to act urgently and wisely, so that our common home may be healed and restored, and all people and generations to come may delight in it. Amen. Just thank you. You can see the quote up there. It comes from the Gospel of Mark, and he said to them, "Go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation." So we cannot proclaim and be good news to people and bad news to creation. That hurts the vulnerable and future generations along with the rest of creation. So we need to be and to proclaim good news to all creation, which includes us. And starting a parish creation care ministry would be good news. So it's part of our participating in the mission of Jesus, who said, "I came that they may have life and have it abundantly." Part of loving our neighbors, especially the vulnerable, and part of collaborating with the love of God for all creation. So thank you, everyone.
Karen, I think we shouldn't close without a thank you to you. You've been such an inspiring leader and very steadfast. And I found you're a fabulous resource when I do have a question for something we can use to go forward. So really very huge thanks to you for all that you do, and in particular all you've done for us and in coordinating this opportunity too. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I look forward to the possibility of a network of parishes that can connect with each other to support and help each other in this ministry.
Yeah, that is where we would like to go going forward, is to we've got a network going of 2, and we'd like to see it grow. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks so much, Karen.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everyone.